Hey everyone, how's it going? With the release of Earth's Scion, the whole landscape of Netrunner has been toppled upside down once more. Just as CTM and hard-hitting news did when they were first released, AGINfusion is set to change how runners behave from now on. With this new identity, we have to relearn the basics of Netrunner once more, because this identity can cause a lot of problems, especially if you're not prepared with the implications and fine nuances of the power, basically, the latent power that AGINfusion provides. My only advice to improving your game against AGINfusion is to play more games. Can't stress that enough. But before we get to game playing, we must first understand what the mechanics, the rules mechanics of AGINfusion is. And as such, we'll be going through the long, dry process of talking about rules-related stuff for AGINfusion. To make this presentation more palatable, we are going to drop in more memes. That's right, we have new ruses for a new world, and we'll start first by looking at the identity text. AGINRUSED says, once per turn, when the runner is making a run and approaching your unrezzed piece of ice, and you're about to res it, you may instead trash the ice to redirect them to the outside of another server. This is known as doing the runner a boop. And this will take effect whether the runner is using a run event or not. Now, this interaction has three different possible outcomes. We'll look at them each separately. The first case is when you boop a runner into a server containing no ice, in which case they approach the server. Because AGINRUSED does not place any restrictions on jacking out, the runner may choose to jack out or continue for a successful run. The second case is when you boop the runner into a server where the outermost ice is unrezzed. AGINRUSED forces the runner to encounter this ice. However, because the ice is in an unrezzed state and you've already passed the window to res it, you as the Corp cannot actually res this piece of ice and the runner passes it. From that point on, they can choose to jack out or continue on to the next piece of ice as per normal. Because of this, the Corp is said to be unable to do the runner a frighten. They are not able to frighten the runner with an unexpected ice res. Finally, the third case is when you boop the runner into a server where the outermost ice is rezzed. Because AGINfusion forces the encounter, the runner cannot jack out till after they are done dealing with the encounter. This is not so much a problem if the rezzed ice was a small pupper, just like in the video. But if it's a big ice like the woofer, the runner is in a lot of trouble and is said to be bamboozled. So to summarize, these are the three scenarios which are possible when booping the runner. Note that the latter case, the one where the outer ice is res, is the most profitable for the Corp, because not only does the runner not get to jack out, they are bamboozled by the outer ice. This is the scenario that you want to force as often as possible as AGINRUSED. Regardless, in any of these cases, and all of these cases in fact, if the runner is currently doing a run event, that run event actually fizzles if they are redirected onto a server that is not the specified server of the run event. For example, account siphon specifies make a run on HQ. If they are booped to a non-HQ server, the siphon cannot trigger. Even if the run is successful, the Corp does not lose 10 credits, the runner does not gain 5 and 2 tags. This is a classic way of rusing the runner as the doggo AGINfusion, and this is what makes this ability so powerful. Since there are a lot of powerful run events out there on the runner side, being able to ruse the runner as the Corp is a very powerful ability and makes AGINRUSED very strong. Speaking of ruses, however, what you might not have noticed is that I have been rusing you all this time. You think I'm gonna play AGINfusion? Nope, it's a ruse. I'm going to actually play run-based Andromeda with Inversificator, another new card from the Earth Scion data pack. This is just basic classic run-based Andromeda. I'm just straight up swapping the Gordian Blade that used to be in it for an Inversificator. It's actually a very interesting decoder. They are both at the same influence, same base strength, same to pump, same to break, but you swap out the strength retention ability of Gordian for the ability to swap ice around, which can come in really handy. We'll see how that works. Alright, we're into the game and already this opening hand is doing me a concern. Do I keep this? This is so marginal. The only thing that's holding this opening hand together is the career fair, because the rest of the hand is basically unplayable. No Temujin, no Desperado, no Dirty Laundry, no Sure Gamble. Means no burst economy, I can't play that many cards from my hand. Looking at it, it seems like this hand is very short on opening money, so I still keep it. It's very marginal. I'm pretty sure I could get a better mulligan, but I decided to keep it because it has Political Operative, which is essential in this matchup. It has an early Aaron Maroon, which allows me to collect counters if my opponent tries to rush. And it has suitable amounts of economy as well. Not the most, but with Daily Cast and KD Jones, I should be able to get up and running. And with the guaranteed draw that is Earthrise Hotel in my hand, I should be able to find my way through this game. Albeit at a slower pace than I'd like to. For example, against this Jackson Howard and Ice Jackson Howard, I can't really contest it here without sustaining severe losses should I trip up on my opponent's Ice. Now my opponent abuses the fact that I did not contest a Jackson Howard to continue overdrawing, so this is really good for my opponent. And I believe at this point they seal up Archives, therefore completely sealing up Temujin, which is a bit sad. Not that I've drawn it, so it doesn't matter. Now, I should be contesting Jackson Howard here, so I liberate the entire KD Jones and decide to go for Jackson, but I make the mistake of taking the entire KD off rather than clicking for a credit. At this point I said, you know what, if that Ice is a terrible piece of ice, I'm in a lot of trouble. But what I really should be doing is saying the worst case is that this could be a DNA tracker. And the way to minimize my losses from DNA tracker is to actually not take the KD money. I should leave money on KD, instead clicking for a credit to give me enough credits to trash Jackson Howard, because then the DNA tracker would not be able to siphon off that many credits from me. So that was a play mistake, but nonetheless it was not a DNA tracker. I was not punished for it. I got to trash Jackson. But however, my opponent does attempt to score out here by installing an upgrade followed by install advance in the remote. Now I know I can't contest the Ice on the remote, whatever that may be, but what I can then do is to force my opponent into losing money with an account siphon. Now of course this siphon is probably gonna fail, because yes, they are going to boot me into Archives, which fizzles the siphon. Now if I had a follow-up siphon here, my opponent would be in serious trouble. They would not be able to afford to score their agenda or defend that remote with Caprice or Betty. Unfortunately, I did not draw my second siphon, so I do the next best thing. I threaten HQ with a Career Fair Temujin, and then I run 2 times, sorry. So this not only gives me a lot of money, it also allows me to access HQ a bunch, and on the second axis I see a Nisei Mark II after a DNA tracker, giving me 2 Aaron counters. So usually you don't rush out against Andromeda. Against criminals in general actually. Rushing out is a bad idea due to cards like Inside Job and their ability to hamper you with disruptive run events like Account Siphon. The fact that my opponent's doing this probably indicates that they are kind of flooded, which is why the Temujin HQ was such a good idea. Now they're forked. Either they show up their HQ defenses by icing it up, or they score the Nisei here and give me free reign on HQ, which is really bad for them, because I draw 2 more cards with Earthrise. It could be a siphon here that bankrupts my opponent and leaves them deep in the dirt. As AGINRUSED, or AGINRUSED, pardon me, you never ever want to go below 5 credits, because your economy engine is typically Celeb Gift, Restructure, IPO, and Hedge Fund. If you go below the 5 credit threshold, most of your economy cards are inactive, making it very difficult for you to recover. You have to click for credits a bunch, and this is very bad for your tempo. Unfortunately, I was not able to punish my opponent with a siphon. Instead, I got a couple of HQ runs off, getting me a global food, going up to 4 agenda points, and getting a bunch more Aaron counters. I also managed to drop an Earthrise here, and I pull a bunch of cards out of my deck with Aaron Maroon. So at this point, with so many agendas in score areas, I can basically draw the rest of my deck with Aaron Maroon, which is very nice to have. Luxury that criminals usually don't have. And this is the benefit of dropping Aaron Maroon early on. Now, I'm looking at my hand, I'm flooded with a bunch of cards that are not really of much use to me. What I need right now are breakers, and I don't really have them. I have a paperclip in the bin, but no decoder and no killer in sight. Well, I do have the Fem, but that's not the killer I want, given that there are no Unrezzed Ice right now. So I'm taking a risk here, running HQ, and praying as hard as I can that that's not a Komainu. That would be an absolute nightmare. Thankfully it's not. With 6 credits, my opponent can't rest too much. I access the scarcity here and liberate the last of my Temujin money. So now I'm thinking, my opponent's on 6 credits. This is a very good turn to start running. I don't have to worry about DNA Tracker. I don't have to worry about Chiyashi. Those are two really nasty Jinteki eyes that you usually face problems with. I poke R&D here. No dice. By the way, I know that HQ ice is probably DNA Tracker because I saw it during my Temujin run earlier on. Now I finally poke the upgrade on last click to see if I can induce my opponent into rezzing this piece of ice. Given that my opponent was very confident of scoring an agenda behind it, I was pretty sure that wasn't a Komainu. It was probably an end run, a cheap end run, or an Excalibur. So my opponent didn't bother since they were too poor. They are making the right play here, preserving the credits so that they can play their burst economy and letting me trash the Caprice instead. They can sure get their Caprice back at a later time if need be. Now I draw for my breakers. I still don't find the breakers, but I do find an employee strike, and this is going to be huge. I now have employee strike in all my criminal decks, or at least the run-based ones, because of Agin Fusion. It's a really problematic IED that warrants a hate card because getting rused by, or rather getting booped by AGINRUSED is the last thing you want. Being booped is not very nice. My opponent already booped me once here, denying me a siphon. Lots more boops to come, given that my deck is mostly run-based events. My opponent does get enough money to play a hedge fund. Now Chiyashi is turned on, and I have to respect that. Thankfully, I have a whopping 36 credits because of that free Temujin that my opponent gave me, so that shouldn't be too much of a problem. I finally find a special order, and that allows me to get my Inversificator out. I'm going to run HQ here, knowing that the ice on HQ is almost certainly a DNA tracker. Nope, I'm going to legwork it. Given that I have 2 clicks here, legwork would force my opponent into a tough choice. I'm going to be using my snoot to snoof around in my opponent's HQ to try to get agendas. I'm going to see a Chiyashi, a Scarcity, an Excalibur. Well, no dice. Looks like my opponent doesn't really have any agendas in hand, maybe 1 at most. This was why they allowed me to get through HQ instead of booping me to Archives. If my opponent had booped me into Archives, I would have used my last click to siphon. And that was what my opponent was worried about. That because they have too few eyes on HQ, they were not able to adequately, they were not able to adequately defend HQ. They would rather get legworked than get siphoned. So fair play to my opponent. I dropped the Earthrise. That should draw me the rest of my deck. In the meantime, my opponent has a Scarcity in hand. That is something I've been seeing time and again. This is why I'm not playing my Employee Strike to turn off the ruses just yet. Even though I would like to not get booped anymore, even though I would like to have played Employee Strike before legworking my opponent there to remove any possibility of getting booped, I do know that it will be immediately counter-currented by the Scarcity. So that was not an option. I need to hold the Employee Strike and wait until either a turn where my opponent's trying to score, at which point I'll drop the strike, or if my opponent carelessly plays the Scarcity before I play the strike, in which case I can override the current and win the current war. My opponent overrides the ice on their HQ with a new piece of ice. This is a very curious move. This tells me that the ice on HQ was in fact a DNA tracker, and the reason they did not res it was because they feared Inversificator. The power of Inversificator shows right here. If my opponent chose to res the DNA tracker during the legwork run, I would have broken it with Inversificator with my huge credit pool, and then swapped it onto an irrelevant server such as Archives. Then there would be a big DNA tracker, which my opponent invested a lot of money into, on Archives doing absolutely nothing. And so this is the power of Inversificator in Criminal. By forcing your opponent to ice up multiple servers to prevent free Temujins, they are dedicating ice onto servers that can later be swapped around to nullify my opponent's biggest code gates. So I play a dirty laundry on R&D and my opponent boops me into Archives. I take the boop and I see double DNA tracker in the bin. My opponent had a DNA tracker on R&D as well, but same logic as HQ. I had the potential to nullify the DNA tracker by shifting it to Archives. My opponent did not want to sink 8 credits into an ice that would be moved on Archives, so they chose not to res the R&D DNA tracker. Instead, my opponent boops and loses the DNA tracker on R&D, so now I get a free run there and heck! Oh heck! What is this? Executive Boot Camp. Spicy! And I started to realize how good it was in AGINRUSED. The problem with AGINRUSED is that up till now, when my opponent has been booping me left, right, center, they have not been able to capitalize on case 3, the case where there's a res outer piece of ice. I have been running very conservatively. As such, my opponent has not been able to res a big, nasty woofer like a Chiyashi on me to redirect me into. And Executive Bootcamp allows you to do that on your own volition as the Corp. You cannot control the runner, you can't force the runner to run into your Chiyashi, especially if it's on a remote. But with Bootcamp, if your opponent doesn't trash it, well, you get to res the Chiyashi wherever it is, and then this turns on AGINRUSED and makes boops very, very painful. Now it's over to me. My opponent has 13 credits exactly, so I know that at this point they don't really want to res a Chiyashi. I finally find my Mongoose. Dropping it on the table, I now no longer have to worry about sentries like Komainus. I can start running safely, knowing that I can break all pieces of ice. So first, I need to attack the Executive Bootcamp to prevent my opponent from resing any nasty woofers here. Let's see what my opponent reacts with. They could res the ice here, they could boop me, but booping is not very effective at this point. I'll just rerun the Executive Bootcamp again. My opponent doesn't want to lose their money, so I get to trash the Bootcamp. And I finally spend my last click running the Jackson Howard. Will they defend this Jackson Howard? Yes, they will, with a lowly paper wall. That's going down. It's going to cost me some down payment to get my paperclip off the bin, but I do that and promptly kill the Jackson. So now I'm in a much better position. With all my breakers out, I can safely assault centrals and until I basically find enough agendas to win. I still have to respect AGINRUSED's booping ability, and my opponent just placed an upgrade on HQ, making things slightly trickier. So instead of going for HQ, I'm going to focus on R&D instead. So now that my opponent has placed a new ice on R&D, this might be something that's very taxing. This might be something that removes a lot of credits from me. This is why I chose R&D. Not only am I getting medium counters, I'm getting lots of credits from Temujin as well. I see a Chrysalis. This is super annoying to break with Mongoose because 3 credits with Mongoose is no joke. This is not a doggo, this is not a pupper, this is a flying moffo. Moffo, whatever it is. I steal a Global Food Initiative, putting me on 6 points. Woohoo! Why not go again? See 2 fresh cards. It costs a lot to get in, but here I'm getting Temujin money, so that's fine. No dice. At this point, I really want to drop the Fem, because Fem breaks Chrysalis for only 1 credit. However, there's still no good Fem target on the board. I really want to save the Fem for an emergency, because my opponent is getting rich. I need to be able to Fem a Chiyashi or an Excalibur at when the time calls for it. So this is something to keep in mind. With my final click, I'm struggling very hard here. The obvious move is to run R&D, and I eventually decide to do that, but my biggest struggle is actually with discarding. I want every single card in my hand. I need the Employee Strike, obviously, to turn off the ruses. I need Temujin, because this is where my last stretch of economy is going to come from. Siphon and Legwork are very good HQ run-based events, and I want to have both in hand, because in case my opponent boops me on one of those run-based events, I can get them back with another one. Finally, I need the Mammon, because I do know my opponent is running Excalibur, and the only way for me to break Excalibur properly is with Mammon. So eventually I decide to ditch the Mammon, thinking that if an Excalibur is res against me, I can hopefully use Fem to counteract that. It's quite a pipe dream. It's going to be very difficult to do, but hopefully my opponent doesn't see the Fem coming and I can do them a bamboozling. So in the meantime, my opponent does continue showing up R&D, making it a tad trickier for me to get my medium digs in. I try to draw. Passport's not going to do much, and now I'm going to divert my attention to HQ instead. I'm pretty rich. I should be able to clear whatever upgrade is on HQ, and hopefully this I should be able to win if my opponent has any agendas in hand. I plan to follow this HQ run up with a legwork or an account siphon, depending on what my opponent does right here. They res the dreaded Chiyashi. That's going to set me back 7 credits. It's not the worst. I still have a good bunch of credits left, 11 credits. The problem is, the upgrade on HQ is a Christian Grid. Had to think very long and hard on this one. Trashing it is probably the right call. After trashing it, I'll be left with 7 credits, and that's exactly enough for me to follow up with an account siphon or a legwork. Not a legwork because it costs 2 to play, but an account siphon would be great. It'll cost me 7 to get back into HQ, but I'll gain 10 from the account siphon. I can clear the tags with Aaron Maroon, and then finish off with legwork, and then maybe some runs on R&D. So I pay my 7, I get the siphon in. Heck! As I was approaching the server for the siphon, as with all good doggos, my opponent used Nisei Bork 2 to bork, and the loud bork scared me away, and I was forced to retreat. Bad doggo. Bad doggo. This was particularly nasty for me because I had exactly enough credits to make it through that Chiyashi. I was really relying on the siphon gain to tide me through the rest of the game. But now that I've been borked, I'm on 0 credits, and I'll have to click for credits for the next few turns. This is a disaster. So yeah, this is a very good example of using Nisei Bork 2 liberally. You don't want to be only saving it for remote runs when you're trying to score agendas. You have to use it at opportune times, and that was a perfect juncture to use it. Very well played by my opponent. That terribly set me back. I continued to misplay here. I was clicking for credits the entire turn, but I forgot that I actually had KD Jones on the board. I should have clicked for 3 credits and loaded up KD. In fact, I should have done that last turn as well. So essentially, I'm missing out on 6 KD credits. Big misplay. But, well, might as well throw my opponent a bit of a bone here. They are actually struggling quite a bit, and I'm only 1 agenda away from winning. Let's see if I can close out this game. So I continue loading up KD here, loading up my credits, because now my next objective is that now that my opponent has reviewed the woofer that is a Chiyashi, floofer actually, it's really floofy, I will try to fam it. That way, it will cost me 3 credits instead of 7 per run on HQ, and that's actually quite important because I do have an option of dropping the Temujin on HQ to farm up economy. At this point, Temujin is looking pretty bad. R&D and HQ are pretty sealed off, so Archives might be a good option for me in terms of getting Temujin money. This is something I'm definitely considering. Next turn might be a good time to liberate KD money and then go for Temujin on Archives. With a solid amount of money, I can then think about actually contesting R&D or HQ for the winning agenda. Or just locking my opponent's remote as well. Threatening credits is actually quite important. Meanwhile, my opponent is trying to think, what's my win condition, how am I supposed to score out my remaining agendas to win? I still have to respect the fact that they have 1 remaining Nisei Bork 2. If they ever do get a Nisei out, I'm in a lot of trouble. Also note that my opponent finally decided to play the scarcity. I'm very happy to see that. This means that they have 1 fewer countercurrent, and I think this is the time to go. So I'm going to strike my opponent here to override the scarcity and prevent any further boops. Then I put Temujin on Archives and then run Archives. My opponent does not have the option here to boop me into HQ and do me a bamboozle. So very thankful for that. I mean, I would have played the strike regardless, because now that there's a Chiyashi on the outermost ice, as the outermost ice on one of the servers, I need to respect the fact that at any point from now on, if I make any run on any Unrezzed ice, my opponent could boot me into Chiyashi. Obviously, I'm nullifying that right now with the employed strike, and this is why strike is so important in this matchup. I hit face first into a Cortex lock, which would do 1 net damage, and I actually pay 5 credits to avoid the net damage. This is how much I value all 3 cards in my hand. Well, more specifically, the Fem. I could not afford to take the 1 in 3 gamble of losing the Fem in my hand, so I paid the iron price 5 credits for a Mongoose break. That was not nice, but the advantage is that once I drop the Fem next turn, which I probably will, on the Chiyashi, I will have filled all my memory slots and I can go for free Temujin Archives runs for the rest of the game. So, I'm going to liberate my KD money right here, drop the Fem on HQ, and run Archives here for the free Temujin money. And yeah, Cortex Lock does nothing at this point, so it's not that good a piece of ice at this stage of the game. On my final click, I will be running HQ. My opponent uses a Jackson here, indicating that there was an agenda in Archives that my opponent pitched. And then I go for HQ here, paying 3 credits to access a single card from hand, but more importantly to rid off the Crucium on HQ so that I can legwork them next turn. Just setting up myself right here. So my opponent at this point says 1 in 5 for the win. Very curious why they said that. In any case, I did hit the 1 in 5 Philotic Entanglement to win the game. The reason why my opponent announced that they had a winning agenda in hand was because they would have won next turn because they had a way to fast advance the Philotic to flatline me. Since I had 3 agendas stolen, I would have taken 3 net damage to lose the game. My opponent did not take into account the fact that I had 2 Aaron counters to prevent that, but I probably would have forgotten about using them. So it had actually ended up way closer than it should have been. I lucked out on accesses throughout the entire game, which made it a lot harder for my opponent to pursue victory. You'll notice that one of my keys to victory this game was avoiding the case 3 situation entirely, where the Corp would boop you into a big piece of ice and then completely bamboozle you. I was able to completely avoid that, and there are some ways in which you can tag your deck against that, and some ways in which you can play around it. First thing you can do is to avoid provoking the big floofers and woofers that are present in your opponent's arsenal. If you don't run the DNA trackers or Chiyashis, they can't boop you into them because they can't res them. Furthermore, inevitably, sometime or later, you are forced to run. You have to contest the remote. You have to make a central run somewhere. Once they start resing these big floofers and woofers, obliterate them. If your deck allows for it, which means playing cards like Emergency Shutdown and Cutlery to remove them as the outermost piece of ice. Inversificator is also another good way to switch them around such that they are no longer outer ice. Failing this, as I did in the mid to late game, I had the fallback of Employee Strike. When they try to boop you, instead you boop the Snoop with an Employee Strike. Therefore, they can't boop you around, and this allows you to freely run Unrezzed ice without worrying about getting booped into a bamboozle. Finally, you can use super efficient ways to deal with these ice. Getting booped is not a problem if you can deal with the encounters. So things like Security Nexus will be really, really good because you can expand your Security Nexus whenever they boop you, and no harm done. This is quite difficult to do nowadays because Chiyashi is actually one of the most difficult ice to break in the game. You never really want to spend 7 credits to break it, even if you have a paperclip. You have to find a more efficient way to do so. Now, what about getting rused? Run-based events are a lot less good, and as run-based Andromeda, you'd think I'll be pretty hampered, and that's kind of true. A lot of my run-based events end up getting rused because of AGINRUSED's ability. But one way to counteract this is to double up on your run-based events. Remember that turn where I played a legwork and threatened the account siphon? Having 2 run-based events that you are ready to play in a single turn can really help mitigate the ruses that come out. Because if they boop your first run-based event, you just play the second one. So oftentimes, Siphon is good if you have 2 Siphons. So something like Siphon and Deja Vu will allow you to guarantee a Siphon through HQ. Another way you can mitigate the ruses is to apply massive pressure on the server in question with regular runs. For example, if I want to get Siphons off, one thing I can do is to pressure HQ a lot by making normal runs on it. Sooner or later, the Corp will have to give in and rest their ice, otherwise they'll get excesses, which means they will leak agendas. So remember when I managed to force the Chiyashi res on HQ, this enabled me to play account Siphon later, the follow-up, even though my opponent denied it with Nisei Bok 2. The point still stands. If they are forced to rest ice on HQ, they have no more unrest ice on HQ. That means you can land your Siphons and legworks. To tag your deck for this, it might be wise to switch your run-based events to more passive run boosters, things like your interfaces, your keyhole, cards that you install to enhance your runs rather than run-based events themselves. This persists when you make normal runs, and as such, it's less effective when the Corp tries to boop you because your run boosters are not wasted, they are installed. So the next time you run on HQ or R&D, you still get the keyhole effect, you still get the HQ interface effect. So yeah, lots of things to learn against AGINRUSED. For those of you who are asking for deck lists, I think you are missing the entire point of this video. The entire point of this video is to introduce you to the good world of memes. What I can recommend you, however, is at the end of this video, I'll link to another video that explains the world of doggos, snoots, and boops. Go watch that. Thanks for watching and happy night running. See you around. Much memes. Such ruses. Very doggo. Wow.